There are two ways in which any government can proceed. One is a way based on what you and I would call a free society, which is enshrined right at the heart of the American Constitution. The other one is a way which allows only one view, both of economics and politics, in which almost everything is either owned or controlled by the state, including the media, including the ideas, including freedom of discussion and everything. There is no freedom of discussion. Now, between those two ways, the free society and the totally controlled society, there are, of course, variations. I think what we've learned in Britain is that we've gradually, over the last certainly 12 or 13 years, with perhaps a little interruption, gone slowly further and further away from the free society towards something else. At the same time, we've found, I don't find it strange, but some other people do, that we have stopped creating wealth. We've had a large number of increasing restrictions. And you've been finding two things. First, that we are more and more concentrating on redistributing the wealth we've got, rather than creating any more. To create more, you need a slightly freer society, and you need an incentive society. Naturally, when I see that happening, I look with very great alarm to societies which have gone even further left. That is, they've tried to redistribute even more and haven't had the incentives for people working hard on their own account, doing well for their families, and often then being able to create jobs for others. They've produced a much more prosperous society than we have.
We fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is The Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. This piece makes me mad. If you're a Canadian, it should really disturb you. But if you're an American, take this as a sign of what your benign liberals can do given half a chance. This is a clear example why you do not want the parliamentary system of government, when a Prime Minister has this much power, the power without the will of Parliament, or so he thinks, to take steps to openly intimidate, let me just say that again, to openly intimidate a foreign company into complying with their will. Think about that. It's both a sad day and a disturbing day that Canadians, for the most part, have yet again no idea this is taking place, because the mainstream media in Canada are complicit. We have to rely on our neighbours to the south, for which this Prime Minister doesn't want Canadians to know. Bearing that in mind, I would advise all those who know how, and those who don't, to seek technical advice at the earliest possible opportunity, to get access to and sign up to a valid US-based, not a Canadian one, a US-based VPN. Once you're signed up, you will understand why I suggested it. And that's all I can say on the subject, because I don't live in a country where I can say what I want to say. Sad though that is. But we are fighting to change that. This piece that I wanted to bring to you is not from the Canadian media. It's from the American media. It's a piece the Canadian government doesn't want the Canadian citizens to know about. It's from the Buffalo Chronicle. Here's the title, and it'll give you some indication of what I'm talking about. At Trudeau's behest, Gould instructed Google News to limit Canadian access to foreign press. Now, we aren't talking about China here. We're talking about a supposed democratic country with, quote, free speech, unquote, which we don't have because this Prime Minister has bypassed our charter. Here's the piece. In the days approaching former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybauld's testimony to the House of Commons Justice Committee on February 27, at the Prime Minister's behest, let me just say that again, at the Prime Minister's behest, Karina Gould, the Minister of Democratic Institutions, God knows what that is, reached out to social media giant Google to pressure the firm So they reached out to Google to pressure them to curtail political criticism on Trudeau's government on its platform. Let me just read that again. To curtail political criticism of the Trudeau government on its platform. Gould placed a call to a senior government relations executive at Google, during which she complained about, quote, hate speech, unquote, and toxic rhetoric, unquote, referring to multiple times to specific criticisms of the Trudeau government that she found objectionable. She then threatened sweeping regulations that would require unprecedented disclosures of advertising sponsors. The firm's existing ad systems are not technologically capable of complying with Gould's demand. It would require a months-long reconstruction of the software to meet the compliance required, she laid out. In response, the firm announced that it will not accept political advertising through the October elections. Think about that. That means any political party in Canada will not be able to advertise through Google, which obviously means YouTube and other things. That disappointed Gould, who implored them to reconsider, even complaining to news media that they have enormous financial and technical resources, they can get this done. In the days following Wilson-Raybauld's testimony, and just 2 weeks after Gould told the House of Commons committee that there was more she was planning to do to limit foreign influence in the election, the Chronicle noticed articles published on our digital platform relating to the ongoing SNC Lavalin scandal stopped appearing in Google News searches in Canada. Our coverage continues to appear in regular Google search results and Google News results in the United States. On the same day as Wilson-Raybauld's testimony, Gould turned to iPolitics to publicly disparage a recent Chronicle report with defamatory comments from Gould and the PMO spokesman. The author of the piece, Charlie Pinkerton, used a Twitter comment made by an obscure reporter who formerly wrote for Vice to broadly characterize this publication as fake news. iPolitics is a subsidiary of Torstar, the publishing giant by Frank Lakabucci, in his capacity as a current board member and former chairman, who finds himself in the centre of the SNC Lavalin Kinder Morgan scandal and subject of recent reporting by the Chronicle. Michael Wernick, the clerk of the Privy Council, was subject to the report that Gould was quick to go to press in an attempt to discredit for plainly political advantage. Wernick sits as one of the 5 government officials who comprise the newly formed Election Protection Unit, who have been tasked by the Cabinet to monitor and neutralise critical election incidents. That's code, ladies and gentlemen, for censorship in Canada. Less than 2 weeks after the bum iPolitics story, Gould announced that the Trudeau government will include $7 million in this year's federal budget and to monitor and actively discredit political content on social media platforms. Critics fear that the curtailment of access to foreign press reports would violate Canadian norms and expectations of a free society. At the same time, the Trudeau government plans to offer Canada's media giants $600 million. So they're bribing Canada's media. So they're offering Canada's media giants $600 million in operating subsidies. That's bribes to you and me, which has unnerved free speech advocates across all party affiliations. So if you received $600 million in operating subsidies, would you consider writing negative reports on the government or that party? I think you'd think twice, wouldn't you? The article continues. In recent weeks, the Chronicle has unabashedly published a series of articles covering Trudeau's government removal of the former Attorney General. With only minor corrections, that reporting has been accurate and precedent. Contrary to Gould's public characterization, the journalism was produced by a Canadian from Southern Ontario, which is very much part of our media market and our body of readership. This writer requested the name be concealed for fear of political retribution. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. This liberal communist government, this thug Trudeau, is trying to shut down free speech before a general election. This is reprehensible. Canadians need to stand up and call this communist thug out. Trudeau is a communist thug. And I don't give a monkey's uncle who thinks that's wrong to say. It's not hate speech, it's a bloody fact. If you're shutting down free speech, you're a thug. You've got no right. Read the Charter. You have zero right. Yes, I'm angry. You better believe I'm angry. Understanding that journalists in the United States enjoy far more sweeping legal protections relating to political free speech, our publisher, Matthew Riccazizi, I think his name is, was willing to extend that protection to this writer and reaffirmed to me personally and to my colleagues that as a matter of policy and our statement on corporate social responsibility, that the Chronicle will continue to protect the work of any journalist fearing retribution of any government anywhere in the world. I just want to make a comment here, and I really don't care what Trudeau does, thinks or says, because he's a thug. We have to, as a matter of national security, remove this Liberal government this October. They have to go. In all the time I've lived here, which is 17 years virtually, I've never heard anything like this. Never. This is quite unbelievable that somebody can be there in Parliament and acting like this. This is not a democratic practice. You cannot shut up the media because you don't like what they're saying. You can't do it. You can in Cuba. You can in the Soviet Union, that still exists as far as I'm concerned, but you can't in Canada. And the Canadians won't stand for this. Trudeau has to go. He has to be exposed. If the mainstream media won't do it, we the people will. We the people will fight. And this broadcaster won't stop. Even if it requires doing its podcast across the border. We won't stop. Trudeau must be exposed. I keep telling you, he's a liberal communist. Yeah, I'm angry. You better believe I'm angry. This piece you will neither hear or see in Canada. And if Trudeau has his way, it will never see the light of day. A Prime Minister of a so-called democratic, open and free society openly strong-arming a foreign company to exclude news from the Canadian search engine. I call that interfering with free commerce at the very least, and to be more accurate, much more accurate, and I quote our Charter of Rights and Freedoms for what it's worth in Trudeau's eyes. This is an excerpt, just an excerpt from our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but it's an important excerpt. It's a piece just like the First Amendment in the United States, etc. The document is much bigger than that. And these are the key points that politicians forever conveniently ignore. They're very simple and they go as follows. They're entitled Fundamental Freedoms. Section 2. Everybody has the following fundamental freedoms. A. Freedom of conscience and religion. B. Freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. C. Freedom of peaceful assembly. And D. Freedom of association. That's what it says, plain and simple. But 57 genders Trudeau and others, particularly those who come from the province of Quebec and who come from the city of Toronto. I do not name them, but people who know what I mean, because we don't have those freedoms I just read out. Because if I did have the freedoms that I read out, I could tell you what was really going on in Canada. But we don't have those freedoms that I read out. And that's the point. Always remember his province, or as they like to say their country, Quebec, never signed up to our charter, but Canada did. So it's the law, Mr. Trudeau. You're breaking the law yet again, and yet again, no one stops him. He is completely out of control. The state police in Canada the RCMP have been told to stand down on any investigation into Liberal shenanigans. How much more crap are we Canadians going to take? It seems quite a bit more, doesn't it? Trudeau must be removed from office for the good of Canadians and Canada. Yes, he is a real and present danger to the safety and security of this country, and we won't rest until him and his party are removed from office. And try and block that, Mr. Trudeau. And that's my comment. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab and email. We're also on Spotify. Just go to the podcast section and type Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass on these links. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com under A Radio. That's EHRADIO, A Radio, and click on the like button. And you can hear a review of our morning moments on WHBJ-DB, News, Talk, Radio on Spreaker.com. Join us and many others. And you can find all our podcasts and morning moments at aradio.wordpress.com. Click on the Morning Moments tab.